So hi, everybody. My name is Orlana Bourgoin. I am the provincial lead for the Special Needs and Inclusion Program. We run through the Trenton MFRC. I want to say thank you all for joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about supporting online learning in your household. So we understand that with this current climate and virtual learning, it's a bit of a challenge for everybody. So we wanted to do this webinar so that way you can not only talk to some experts in the field that are educators themselves, but also, quite frankly, that are parents who are doing virtual learning at home as well. So you can get some of that real life experience and some tips and tricks on how to help you support your children at home learning. So with that, I'm actually going to pass it off to our lead, Robyne Hanley-Dafoe, who's going to introduce herself and her colleagues.
Hello, everyone. My name is Robyne, and we are so thrilled to be here today to talk to you about all things e-home learning. As Orlana said, we are educators, but we are also parents and supporters and grown-ups who are doing the best we can in our current landscape. So we have come together as a collective of allies who are here to help us think about some of these key ideas when we think about how we can support families and grown-ups supporting their learners across the learning spectrum. So we're very excited to be here today. We will have a chance to have a question and answer period at the end. So if you have a question for any of us, please feel free to use the question and answer feature located at the bottom of your screen. So please feel free to ask questions. We're here to help, and we look forward to this time together. So before we go any further, I just want to recognize that the land in which I'm presenting on tonight and the land in which I've done this work upon is land of the Anishinaabe First Persons of the Mississauga. And I recognize even both of my colleagues and Orlana, we're all in different places and representing different areas, and we give thanks to the elders for their care for and teaching of our lands. So to get us started, what I'm going to do is let you know who's all here, what does the next little while look like, and again, some of these key ideas that we're hoping to accomplish. So our first person up in queue after I'll give a little bit of a talk is my colleague, Rich McPherson. And Rich McPherson is an educator. He is a certified teacher. He also teaches at the School of Education at Trent University at the Peterborough campus and the Durham campus. He is also a proud dad, a great partner, and he's going to talk about all things how he's managing and thinking about teacher and parent perspective as we navigate e-learning with his little ones who are also at home right now while he's also working remotely. And my other colleague, which I'm excited to have here as well, is my colleague, Aleyah-Erin Lennon. Aleyah is a very gifted educator on all things around children wellness. She is a wonderful resource that we tap into often in our work. She really understands how to help children regulate, and she's going to be talking about what to do with some of those kind of challenges and maybe some of those barriers and roadblocks you might be missing or you might be running into trying to support your child during this season of learning during COVID-19. So we're very excited. So a huge thank you and a recognition to Orlana and her team for this place to be able to gather and create allyship and community and knowledge transfer. So many thanks there. And to get us started, I'm going to share my slide deck with you so you'll be able to see this. And again, this will be posted so that way anyone who wants this information, we can make it readily available. All our material is open educational resources, which means you're welcome to borrow it and share it and make it good use of work for you. So as I said, these are my colleagues. We also have our contact information posted here because we welcome conversations to continue. We recognize that supporting one another, thinking about our early learners, thinking about the challenges that families and communities are facing right now in the current landscape, it's important to know there's places you can ask questions. So again, please feel free to reach out. So one of the things that I just wanted to do is an exercise that we call in psychology, it's called noting. And noting is when we just take a wee bit of a snapshot of the current landscape or the current lay of the land. And what I'm hearing right now from families all across the board is I hear them saying, Robyne, life is hard. They're feeling the pressure. They're feeling the fray. They're feeling the edges. A lot of folks are telling me that they're feeling a little bit wobbly, that they're feeling a little bit unsteady. And I just want to give us a gentle reminder that life is hard. But it's not because you're doing it wrong. This is a really complex season right now. And as parents and looking after little ones and supporters, there's a lot of investment that we have with our head and our hearts. This is what we call heavy heart work, trying to support our learners right now while trying to keep everything going forward and trying to keep that flow of our family systems. So just a wee bit of a pause. We know it's hard right now and we see it, we validate it, we acknowledge it. And what we're going to offer offer this webinar is some strategies to think about how we can address this. Now, one of the things that I researched, my area of specialty is around resiliency. I'm really curious about how do we encourage children to get up when they have a setback versus give up? How do we encourage the children to keep going and finding a way to find that almost next level so that they can continue to progress or they can meet challenges? Now, there's a lot of kind of almost controversy at this point when we think about the idea of resiliency. A lot of people think it's really overused at this point. We hear this word tossed around. What I want to do is just clarify when I'm talking about resiliency, what I'm thinking about is this idea that it's how we navigate setbacks. It's how we experience failures. It's how we essentially learn how to fail forward. We know that life is going to be full of bumps and bruises and setbacks. That's part of it. But what we're really curious about is not to make children that aren't impacted by that, but how do we mitigate the negative effects that children will experience? So we wanted children to learn that idea of persistence, learn that idea that they can do hard things, that they're able to continue. We also want children to understand that part of resiliency is knowing when to ask for help, when we need to reach out and make connection and community. So again, when we think about this work, what we see is that there's kind of these pauses that we want to take when we think about the complexities of what children are trying to stick handle right now. So a few little notes that I thought might give us some context or a little bit of what we call awareness pauses are here. So first, as a parent, if you're looking, for example, at your child's curriculum that they're doing right now, what you might notice is it looks very different. It probably looks very different from what curriculum you looked at when you were an educator, or maybe even older children and siblings, they had a different experience. So what I thought would be helpful is just to give acknowledgement to the fact that our curriculum changed substantively in the province of Ontario in 2005. We also know that there were other substantive reviews in 2020. So the curriculum actually looks different now. So if you're wondering what they're working on, it's okay that it seems a little bit different. Now, I would encourage you to check out the government's website because all of the curriculum by subjects and grade level are posted. Those are accessible documents that you can check out to see what ought our little ones be thinking about across the grade level. Now, another piece that I would like to say, if you are in that position as a supporter working with your young ones in education, I just really want to reinforce the importance that emotional health is more important than our academics. We have to make sure our children are okay. And there's interesting research that talks about that if a child doesn't feel safe or if a child doesn't feel as though they have roots and they're grounded, they're not really going to remember what they're trying to learn anyway, but they'll remember how they felt about the learning. So what we really want to do is create and foster positive learning environments. Right now, if you're sitting there and your little one is crying over homework in that way that you can recognize as a supporter of that child that they're having a really hard time, it's okay to pull back. And my colleague Rich will talk a little bit more about what that looks like in terms of expectation setting. Now, another thing that I always like to tell parents that's really important when we think about learning and how our children go about experiencing education is I want you to think about how you talk to your child eventually becomes the child's self-talk. So what you say to your child will inevitably become some of the language that they're going to use. So we want to be mindful and keep top of mind of the fact that how we parent is going to become their inner dialogue. So we want to fill it up with positive affirmations, realistic expectations, but also this idea that they have a really kind of good handle of how they have that internal dialogue. So for example, when they meet a challenge in their learning, instead of saying things like, oh, I'm not good at this, or I can't do this, it's this idea that they might not be able to do it yet. We want to cultivate a growth mindset. Another thing that I always encourage parents to think about is the importance of how our language is going to have an impact on the child. And what I mean by that is I hear sometimes people really immersing the language with their child, and what I would invite you to do is do our best to kind of separate it a wee bit. And here is an example. Sometimes I'll hear somebody say, my child is giving me a hard time, which makes it sound it's personal, right? The child is making your life difficult as a grown-up. And I get it. I have 3 of our own that are 12, 14, and 16. So we've navigated quite a few stages and ages at this point. what I would invite you to think about is this reframe, to think about, my child is having a hard time. It's not directed at you. You're part of the experience, but it's not actually directed at you. Now, another thing I like to remind parents is that it may be as though it seems like your child might be not listening per se, but children are always watching. We want to be really careful of the messaging we're putting forward, because children are always picking up our cues. And we want to be careful because we model how we handle disappointment. We model how we handle frustration. We model how we navigate setback. So again, it might not always feel like they're listening, but good grief, we do know that they're watching. And the last kind of awareness pause or point that I'd love to share with you is this idea that what children really need is they need a present parent. They don't need a perfect parent. They don't need a parent who has everything all together. They don't need a parent who has like everything in order. They just need us to show up. They need us to just be part of their world. So there's a lot of pressure right now on being a professional and a working parent, or somebody who's at home navigating childhood and households. But we really got to make sure that we put things that matter most, matter most. Keep top of mind that being present is way better than trying to be perfect. Now, one of the things that I see in my program is this idea that there's 5 core competencies that contribute to a child feeling resilient. This is going to help them form a baseline. So before we get into the teaching and tutoring strategies, which I know you're all excited to hear about, I do just want to take a pause to think about, these are essentially areas with your child or your children that you can foster, that you can cultivate to really help strengthen their confidence that they can do hard things. The first one is a sense of belonging. Children need a home team. Children need to have people in their corner. And what the research actually demonstrates, it's one person who the child knows will not give up on them. It's one person can make the difference in a child's life. So we really want to make sure children have that deep understanding that they're safe and they have a home team. Because when we are operating from trust, a child is then able to take risk, which is involved in learning. The second thing that we talk about is perspective. And for children, I would think about this more as a mindset. We want to cultivate a mindset of learning. This idea that failing is part of the process. Learning is messy. Learning is meant to be disruptive. So it's okay to keep that in mind, that we don't start off as masters. We all start off as beginners at something, and it's important to recognize that. The third variable we talk about when we think about resiliency across the lifespan is this idea of acceptance. And this is learning how to choose what's within your control and what's not within your control. So what's really helpful is if we can model and encourage our children to decipher their controllables. What is it that they can think about? What is it that they have influence over? And helping the child realize that there's some things that you can influence and then there's other things that you can't change. It's actually helpful. It gives them space. So here's an example. Let's say, for example, you have a little one who is a certain height and they want to be taller. Well, unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do about our biology on that. But if they want to learn how to jump higher, there's jump programs for that. So what's within your control is the height you're at, but what you can actually influence is this idea of how high your vertical can be. So again, always thinking creatively about that. Now, the fourth variable that I think is fundamental that children need to have fostered is this idea of hope, or choosing to be hope-filled. We need children's optimism to be cultivated. We have to protect the morale of our children. I talk often about the fact, as the grown-up, we have to hold the line to make sure that the child believes in the potential of the future. We can't tell them that by the time they're older, there won't be a planet because of global warming, and there won't be this, and you're going to have to wear masks forever. Like, that's going to create a sense of doom and gloom for little ones. We have to hold the line and foster and cultivate hope-filledness. And the last one, and one that I think is so fundamental for our children, is the idea of humor and play and joy and laughter. And I'm so excited that Aleyah is here to talk to you about some of these ideas of joy breaks and a way to cultivate and foster our children being well. So all 5 of these serve as a constellation for children to be okay. And again, we have lots of information that we can share with you along this around what this means and what it can look like. Now, before I turn it over to my colleague, Rick, the one thing that I want to actually talk about is a little bit about our roles as grown-ups. Now, the one invitation I would give you when you're working with children, I hear a lot of teachers and a lot of grown adults talking about like your mom and your dad, right? We're still kind of using some of this traditional language. What I think is a lot easier for children is if you just refer to whoever's in their family system as their grown-ups, because we don't know what everyone's family system looks like. And it could actually be quite triggering for children if they perhaps live with their grandparents or they live with an auntie or their home situation looks different. So when you're the educator or the person talking about children and you're referring to the adult group in their household, I encourage you to call them grown-ups because the children will know who the grown-ups are in their world. Now, when we think about who our grown-ups are, one of the things that I would invite you to think about is this differentiation between being a supporter versus being a rescuer. What our children need right now are supporters. They need to have people in their corner that's showing them skills, supporting them, cheering them on. They don't need people who are going in and doing their homework for them. We know that behavior is not going to serve the child in the long run. And one of the things we refer to this as is we used to talk this about like helicopter parents that they would swoop in and rescue the child. What I'm seeing in my practice right now is something that I would probably call more like Zamboni parenting, where they like take away every obstacle in front of the child that they're ever likely to experience. So the child doesn't have a chance to figure out how to problem solve. So we want to make sure that we're in that role of supporter and not the rescuer. Now, what I've done here is provided some tips and some strategies about ways that we can cultivate parent resiliency. And again, we're going to provide this slide deck, so you're welcome to view this at your own time. But the goal is that we just want to make sure that we're setting the example of what we want to foster. Now, there's other examples that I can provide for you here around thinking about how we want to make sure we're not accommodating for everything. We want to make sure we're helping children understand risk versus mitigating danger. Also, there's problem sets that we want to encourage children to learn. So again, there's lots of information here and we're going to make this available to you, but I don't want to take up any more time because I really want to turn this over to my colleague, Rich, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about some of the deliverables when it comes to teaching. So I'm going to pass this over to our colleague, Rich, and we'll join you in a few minutes for the question and answer period at the end.
Okay, well, I had an introduction prepared, but Robyne nailed it, and I don't have to go too deeply into that. So thank you for that. So this is interesting. This is almost sort of like my own therapy session that I get to. These are the questions that I have for myself because I come with both of these lenses, being an educator myself and a parent to two young children. I have a senior kindergartner and a grade 3 student who are both doing online learning. And so a lot of my perspective also comes from my experiences through education, having taught in an elementary setting with grade 3, 4, and 5, and then moving into research and moving into multimedia for professional development for teachers, and now finding myself in a position where I'm working with teachers in pre-service teacher education. And one of the areas that I focused on when I was doing my research work was the impact of social media and device use on well-being. And so, as you can imagine, I have, with what I know in terms of research, this constant juggling of what, as a parent, I want my kids, how much access I want them to have, versus the reality of the situation, and also myself as a teacher. And I will say that, going into this, I was pretty darn excited that, oh, I have the experience, I can do this. But what I brought to the table in terms of my teaching background became almost irrelevant when it came to thinking about seeing myself as a parent with these two kids. So I'm hoping to share the realities of someone who has some of these tools and how difficult and challenging it has been. So this is actually a perfect reflection of the start of the pandemic to where it's coming now. And I did a nice scribble and it seemed to work out perfectly for me. And so as you can see, the big one at the beginning, that was where it was this ebb and flow, which I'm sure you felt as well, of it's going great and then it's not going great, and it's going great, it's not going great. And so it took some time for my wife and I, who are both working full-time from home, started out with 3 to 5 hours of Zoom calls a day while having two young children to entertain. And so we kind of had to navigate that for the first couple of months of figuring out what were we comfortable with and what were we okay with letting go. And I think, you know, obviously a big thing for me was screen time. That is a huge challenge for a lot of parents of how much screen time your kids are getting. But when you're faced with a pandemic and you can't go outside and the kids can't do what they used to do, and you have to work, that's just the reality of that situation. And so as we got into the summer, we started, you know, kind of just reimagining what our expectations were in terms of moving forward into school. And I think that now we're kind of at a point and we're always communicating about what we're okay with in our household. And so we've come to the realization that, you know, what will success look like for the two of our kids at the end of the year? And I think it all comes back to being happy and healthy, and that they're where they need to be. It's not like it was before, where we measured success on, you know, how many events were they taking, you know, were they a part of in terms of sporting or groups after school or in the community or at school, and even academics. You know, we were always pushing our kids to get those grades. And I think that success, that's not how I see success moving forward. So that kind of feeds into this idea of thinking about what kind of restrictions we have during a pandemic. And right out of the gate, like I said, my ambitions were much greater than I was capable of doing. And like many of you, that might have come at you really quick. I know that I had great plans of cleaning out the garage and cleaning out the storage, and reality was none of that happened until maybe summertime that we started to get into that kind of stuff. So it took some time to temper those things and redefine what our routine looked like. You know, the routine was during the day. The kids were off to school, we were working, and we had that time to ourselves, and we did what we needed to do. But now that routine during the day is, there's so many curveballs coming in all over the place. And as much as we try to set it up and stick to their schedule and support them, it's just not realistic. And so we've had to really think about what that routine is. And I think that routine comes closer to after the day. So again, it goes back to managing the expectations versus the reality of the situation, and really coming to terms with the situation that we're in, and just knowing that there's only so much that we can do. And I think that the biggest thing that we've found is just is talking to people, talking to other parents. And luckily, you know, we were with the magic of technology, we have, you know, phone numbers of parents of friends from schools and sports teams, and so we've been able to text with them and say, hey, what's going on? How are you doing? How's your situation? And we have a mix of that in person and online learning. So at the end of it all, it just seems that everybody is in the same boat in that regard of just going, oh man, this is tough. And so that's kind of where we're at. And again, I say this as someone who has that background of how I think and know I should be working with my children. And so thinking about that, I wanted to speak with some of my colleagues about what were their goals as teachers heading into this year. And they responded how I had hoped that they responded, because my goal and my wish for education as a whole was that that well-being was at the top of the priority list. It wasn't academics. You know, that's not the important piece at this point. And thankfully, you know, the two quotes that they gave me, one was in person and one was online, was really just about maintaining that confidence, a place to be able to feel safe. And that's exactly what teachers are trying to do right now in schools, especially, is to make kids feel safe. But even online, and navigating this whole new process of muting and unmuting and video on, video off, getting back for after recess and all those transitions. So there's so many new challenges, and I think that the teachers as a whole are maintaining that sort of thinking, and it's helping students remain healthy. Physically and mentally, and giving them the support they need to, again, stay where they need to be in terms of their age level and what is required of them. But again, I think that is sort of that's after the fact. We just want kids to to be safe and feel engaged, and that they are doing something and continuing on. And that goes into with the adults that I teach, with the new teachers. My number one priority every time I check in with them is at the start of class is, how are you? What's going on? How are your other classes going? How are you navigating, having to do things on your own time and not so much synchronously all the time? And it's giving them that space to do things when they're able to do them and get to them. So when I think about those two perspectives, it really comes down to the fact that this is difficult for all of us. Teachers have their own challenges. We have our own challenges. Teachers are parents too, and so it's a lot of self-talk and going and thinking about those pieces and understanding that we really are in the same boat when we're navigating these new situation. And something, Robyne talking about kids, just they're seeing everything and hearing everything, and it's, the literature is very clear that kids today, their brains have just developed in a completely different way, and they take on. I've been having this conversation with family and friends that back when we were younger, it was always you talk to, you look in my eyes when I'm talking to you as a parent, kind of thing, right? Get them to look in your eyes. And I do the same thing because I carry that on traditionally, but there's something fundamentally different when I see my kids and they're not looking at me in the eyes, and they retain every single thing that I said to them, and while watching TV and while playing with a toy or something like that. And there is that going on. They are processing stuff at such a higher rate than we can even imagine. And so I think that takes us taking a step back and understanding that they learn differently, they have different ways of thinking, and it also goes into how they form relationships. And obviously the research that I'm interested in, we know that face-to-face interactions are very important for relationships, but we don't know what that's going to look like, in 20 years. And who are we to define how kids form those relationships? So I'm constantly in that state of reflection and thinking that maybe this is how they do this, and this is how they navigate those pieces. So for myself as an educator and a parent, I've come to the idea of just being present and helpful when I need to be, and I'm not going to be judgmental, because we cannot lose sight that our children are in a pandemic as well. And we seem to think that their worlds are so small, but oh my goodness, they're so big, and everything that they see and take in. And so we need to remember that they've lost a lot too. It's not just what the challenges that have come across our plates. And so that kind of feeds into this idea of when I'm at home and working with our kids when we have a chance to. And I think it's really important to differentiate the difference between what a tutoring and teaching is. As a tutor, you're there, you're providing extra strategies and support. You're giving kids space and time to work through whatever math question or writing, whatever it is that they're doing. And you're really, as a tutor, you're focusing on the skill aspect. And as a teacher, you're thinking about the child holistically, and you're really tapping into the behaviors and the emotion. And the unique thing about a teacher is that you get to do both of those. You have a license when you're in the classroom to be able to do those two things. And because, like we know or observe that the kids seem to listen to other people other than their parents, that's the power of a teacher in the classroom, is that they can do both of those things. They can kind of get into those skills while also fostering the behaviors and emotions of a child. Whereas as a parent at home, you can't really do that. Your kids see you differently in that way. And so it's I'm guilty of it, and I have to stop myself all the time. But there's many times where I'll sit down and I'm trying to support my son or my daughter in something, and immediately I start going, well, you're being lazy about this. I know that you can do this. And I just start going down this road of tapping into things that I know, but that's not why I'm here in this moment. I'm actually supposed to just be giving them some time and some strategies, not attacking their emotions and stuff like that. And so it's it's constantly thinking about, separating that when you're sitting down with your kids. I think that's really important, or you'll lose them. And I think you need to make that, if I'm sitting down playing Lego, I'm playing Lego, nothing else, and so I think you need to think about those types of things. And so again, we're working remotely. We're extremely privileged in our situation that we have two parents at home, and that's not the same for everyone. And I remind myself and other people of that every single day, that we are certainly fortunate. But we still have those challenges. It's still chaotic in our household during the day. And you might have seen this quote, and it's kind of been my mantra for so many months now, is you are not working from home. You are at home during a crisis trying to work. And I've told myself that over and over again, to sort of go, yeah, that's right. We're actually in the middle of a global pandemic, and it's actually getting worse. And we have to somehow maintain, our own sanity, and be able to support our family when they need us. And so, and just through a lot of these points, and Robyne has touched on some of these, but I've really tried hard to stop feeling guilty as a parent and as a teacher of not doing the things that I think I should be doing, because I can't get to those. I have to work, and I have to be with my kids. So I have to be able to pick that battle, and it's not supposed to be easy. And we've actually, in our household, my wife and I have both made a very valiant effort. And when kids are on recess, we're on recess too. And we go out with them, and we play with them. We need to get outside as much as they do. And so we make sure that we get out there and we move ourselves. We go for a quick walk, or we go to the mailbox and back, or we time our kids on their bikes to go up the street. How many times can you go like really quickly back and forth? Just ways to get their blood flowing. And it's also been loosening screen times. Again, it's been my biggest thing of not having, our children be on screens. But, at the end of the day, it's the one thing that they want to get to sometimes, because they get to connect with their friends and be online and play games and talk. And who am I to take that away from them just because I think it's not good for them? It's, that's been a long process to get to the point of saying that's okay. And it takes some time working through that. And I know it's not going to be forever like that, but that's where we are right now. And so again, positive reinforcement. And a senior kindergartner was never meant to sit in a chair for so long. It's a constant battle of managing behaviors, but I get it. I try not to get frustrated, and that's just the way that it is. It's really hard for the little ones to do that kind of stuff. And thinking about older kids at home with devices, what I preach to my students. Everything has to do, you don't have to be an expert in technology. You just have to be able to be comfortable with having conversations with your children about what they're doing, how it's impacting them. Are their eyes hurting, their hands hurting, their necks hurting? All those types of things create a dialogue to make them more reflective in their usage, because we know just how connected teens are, and removed sometimes from different situations, and having their eyes glued to their screens. So that's a little thing. Thinking about conversation, that's a huge piece. And just finally, just a few supports. If you haven't found these, some of them are offered by your school. There's Khan Academy, which is a non-for-profit, great resource. It's an app, and it's a website tool, and that it goes from K to 12. It has video tutorials on every level of your academics for your kids, so they can actually just put their headphones on and go through it, and it follows their whole timeline and it stays with them. That's a great free resource. Epic Read is something a lot of school boards have, and they might give out the codes if they have them. I would inquire if they do. That again is for young learners like my daughter. She's not at that stage of reading, but it can read to her. The Kumon books are very, very good books. They kind of look like that. They're very, very picture-based and very self-explanatory for little ones who aren't reading yet. And so those are nice books that we use with our kids afterwards if they've finished up early with their online learning. Code Spark is a great coding app. You can probably get it free for a little bit, but kids can start coding by playing a game and not knowing that they're actually learning coding, which is a cool app. And as well as Prodigy. Prodigy is a great mathematics game that a lot of schools have been using. But so those are some of the tools that we have been doing in our household. And one thing actually that I will show you that we do in our house is we have this big board, and actually at the end of the day, so we have kids pick dinner, treasure hunt, family movie, treasure hunts, and kids choose baking, family video games. So we have these things that we created so that at the end of the day, if the kids had a great day, they get to put a sticker and work together on where they want. And once they accumulate the number that we set, they get to have that item. It's also a way of kind of pushing ourselves into doing things as a family, because it has become hard to do that. So it motivates them each day, and we remind them of it, of, don't miss your sticker today. And but it also gives us a chance to be together and do these things together, and it's a fun time. So best of luck. It's not easy, but you can do it for sure.
Hello, everybody. I just, while Rich passes the baton to me, I'm noticing my body has been sitting here for almost an hour, and I'm just inviting everyone just to check in with your body and notice how you're feeling. And if you want to get out of your chair and stretch or grab a drink of water, maybe take a couple deep breaths in. I know Rich makes such a great point, like kindergartens weren't meant to sit in chairs, but I don't think any of us were. I really don't. I have a really hard time sitting still, and I have about 3 or 4 different kind of seating options in my home office. I got an exer ball, a chair. Right now I'm sitting on an ottoman and a meditation cushion because that helps my kind of hips relax a bit. So that is just kind of ground zero in terms of setting the space. So hello, and thank you for allowing me to be part of this, Robin, Rich, Orlana, and all of you on the call and possibly watching it later. It's a privilege to be in these conversations because these considerations, this well-being over academics, and supporting parents, supporting kids, and supporting our teachers and educators, this is really important work. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about like when things go wrong with like best laid plans, right? I bet everyone here can relate to that. So trauma-informed embodied learning strategies for children and youth. This is really my passion because it's something I've lived personally. First things first, we live in bodies, right? I know that's not revelatory, but I think we forget. Our education system here in the West privileges the mind, right? And we forget sometimes that we're living in these bodies that have a lot of needs and are always giving us information that we've kind of been trained to ignore. So that is a really important thing out of the gates to consider. And to nurture, especially in this time of all this ambient fear, right? Living through a global pandemic is something that none of us have any lived experience with. And it's like there's a constant air raid siren going off all the time. But through work and school and all the other things that life demands, we're expected to pretend we don't hear it. But our bodies are hearing it all day long, whether we're conscious of it or not. So just that's something to keep in mind. One thing that I really have found to be effective, it's this idea of life rhythms. It's a concept I borrowed from Waldorf pedagogy, some alternative approaches to education and raising well young ones. And as somebody who also personally, I'll disclose, I live with some PTSD and anxiety. I'm in a traumatized body sometimes, and I offer that without any shame because so many of us, both grown-ups and little ones, are dealing with some form of trauma. A lot of us are, and trauma lives in the body. So we can't think it away, we can't affirm it away, although those kind of strategies are helpful as part of our toolkit. We have to remember that our bodies love rhythm and stasis. And so something that I have found invaluable for myself and my own well-being as an educator and a grown-up and a supporter, but also in the lives of the little ones and the not so little ones that I work with, is this idea of rhythm. It's a little bit more approachable than the word routine. You know, it's the difference between like discipline and commitment. It's just a bit of an energetic difference there. So first things first, in the mornings, creating some kind of ritual that breeds joy. And it's as simple as that. If you can take away nothing else from this webinar, I hope it's something along the lines of feeling good is our job. It's our job. When we make feeling good our priority, everything else flows, right? We can come to our challenges with a little bit more optimism and resilience, which Robyne has so many great things to talk about. But I wake up and I drink some water and I create some gratitude. And it's kind of like you generate your own joy when you reflect on what you're grateful for. And kids love doing this. And you'll know what works for your particular situation or family. That could be snuggled up in bed first thing in the morning, sharing what we're grateful for, and visualizing something I do. We call it magical manifesting. We think about our day ahead and what we want to experience and what we want to accomplish. And we talk about it as if it's already happened. And we generate that joy and satisfaction that we're going to feel when we finish that math homework and get to go outside for the rest of the day. And also, again, prioritizing this body, which is our vehicle for learning everything we're learning. So some kind of movement or joy practice. One of my favorite things is cultivating different playlists and then just shaking it out and having a little morning dance party. And then with the school day, if you're working, if your children are learning from home, or if you're an educator educating from home, it's this idea of a dedicated learning space and cultivating a space that is trauma informed and that has a little bit of magic. I love that word because I really suspect, even though it's not something we're always supposed to talk about, I think we all really like the idea of magic. Raise your hand if you believe in magic. Yeah, so I've already talked about how I need different seating arrangements, and you'll see that in a lot of our classrooms when we're, in the before times. Kids had toggle chairs or standing desks, or could take their reading to a carpet or a little fort. So thinking about these different kinds of environments that teaches our body that they're in a safe place to be ready to learn. Plant allies. So much research has shown that plants, purify our air, but also make us feel good, make us feel better. So having some plant life in your learning space can also breed a connection with the learner, tending to these plants and just being mindful and aware. Music. I love to listen to focus music, instrumental music. It's like a cue, a trigger for my brain to go, okay, it's work mode. So maybe letting kids cultivate their own playlists would be a real buy-in factor. And I have learning talismans. You can call them whatever you want, but this is a stone from Ireland, the place where my ancestors come from. And I have a couple other things that I keep with me. And some kids like those fidget widgets. It can help them. It can allow their body to do something kinetic so that their brain can now focus. So thinking about those different things. In the yoga work that I do with kids, we have breathing buddies. And so they're like a favorite stuffed animal or something you can place on your belly and watch them go up and down with the breath. But the most important thing is to take body breaks and to get outside as much as possible. Honestly, there's a mountain of research that shows that we need fresh air, all of us, children and grown-ups, but particularly kids, they need outdoor play, free play. and the ability to take risks outside. So like, you know, parkour on that rock or climb up that place, you know, and with precautions and safety first, but to be able to just be outside. After school, you know, it's if we're working and learning from home, we don't have that bell, you know, and grab your stuff and run out the door, and that feeling of like transition has been completed, you know. So finding a way to create those rituals and those transitions, and whatever is going to work for you. But some of the things that I love is that getting outside, or again, a joy practice. I loved, Rich, your table with those incentives, that kind of stuff, getting creative and allowing your kids to participate in those creations. So on that topic, just continuing with this motivation and engagement, it's about meeting our kids where they are and capitalizing on their passions and interests. So when I was a forest school teacher, this picture, we literally used to do this in the first few days and weeks of our new semesters. We'd all go outside and we'd lay on our back, old school, with our hands behind our head, look up at the sky, and just wonder out loud. So having space, creating space together as a family or as a learning community to just hear from kids and youth. What are they thinking about? What are they wondering about? What are they curious about? And then directing some learning opportunities along those lines. Why not, right? I'm going to skip down to this thinking outside the curriculum box, which I'm echoing what Robyne and Rich have already shared, and what educators are really finding. You know, this transformative pedagogy is, it does not matter what those documents say. I mean, they're great jumping off points, but there's so much more to holistic learning and passion project-based learning, right? If I like, baking is great for young kids, but you know, growing a garden, that might not be the best thing for this season, but you know, maybe in a pandemic, like, where are the needs in our own communities, right? Does the food bank need somebody to start organizing a porch pickup drive? We did that in Peterborough when this first hit. You know, having our children and our youth get involved in creating and giving back to community, and then that starts checking all the curriculum boxes. There's literacy, there's numeracy, there's social science, there's all these kinds of things when we follow our passions, right? Remembering feeling good is our job and following that curiosity and passion. So now I want to just shift gears a little bit and talk about when our kids are in distress, or you know, this is foundational knowledge for living through a pandemic, right? So our nervous system, I like to think of it as the mothership, right? And I'm more of a Star Trek versus Star Wars, but you can think of whichever your favorite spaceship is. So we have two arms of the nervous system, which regulates all of our emotions, our endocrine system, our hormones, everything. Our nervous system is the mothership, the motherboard. So we have the sympathetic nervous system, which I remember it this way, like the sympathetic nervous system needs our sympathy. It's working really hard. That's how I remember how to tell them apart. But that's when our adrenaline kicks in and we are ready to fight, flee, or freeze. This is where kids are, their sympathetic nervous system is engaged when they're in distress, when they're having a panic attack, when they're overwhelmed with anxiety, when they're shutting down and withdrawing, when we can't get them to talk to us, or when they're pitching a fit. So what we want to do is we want to try and bring our parasympathetic nervous system online. This is the juicy sweet spot where we are able to relax and our body is able to recharge, and we can digest not just physically our food, but our experiences and our emotions. And so in keeping with this metaphor of the mothership, breath is the bridge. So Captain Kirk and Spock in the bridge, the control room, if you will, they're steering the ship, and breath is that bridge in our bodies for our nervous system. it can override the dysregulation of the sympathetic nervous system and command both our brains and our bodies back into stasis. And the cool thing is, our breath is immediately available in each and every moment. It's with us perpetually throughout our entire life, right? It's the essence of our life and our body. So it's the most powerful tool we can use to regulate this nervous system. And I like to think of it as breath is the keys to the world's most state-of-the-art pharmacy, right? In this world of Western medication, we can literally transform our emotional state and regulate different physical processes just with different types of breaths. And I'm going to give you a couple options, or like a couple of these actual techniques at the end. But in effort to just experience this ourselves, let's take a minute here and try an experiment. Just notice your body. Just take a minute to check in. I find it helpful to gently close my eyes just because it allows me to look inward, but just feel your body in space. Notice where you might be holding tension or any sensations in the body. Notice your breath. How are you breathing? You may be holding your breath, or is it kind of up in the chest? Or is it slow and deep? And there's no judgment here. One's not better than the other. We're just noticing. Now let's take a nice centering breath. So a centering breath is really simply just inhaling slow and deep. And exhale. If you like, you can place your hands on your belly or your heart. And just try to focus on that exhale. Leaning into the back of your body, begin to send the breath into the sides of your rib cage, into your lower belly. And then just checking in again. Notice how you're feeling. So when we are in distress, and you know, there's a strong argument to be made that living daily life is distressing. Most of us are in some form of distress all day long, and that doesn't exclude our young ones, right? But when there's an overt kind of episode of a child in distress, these are some tips leading from the body and that wisdom of the body and nervous system that can help. So number one is lead. Get grounded and calm yourself, because emotions literally are measurably contagious. So use these techniques yourself, and they're a practice, right? It's a practice, not perfection, these working with these tools. Soothing. So using calm, kind, and firm tones and words. So when we're in distress or when we're dysregulated, when the sympathetic nervous system has kicked in, that is coming from the limbic part of the brain. So our frontal lobe, the part that's, rational and in charge of time and choice and all of those things, it's offline. It's offline. So there's no point really in trying to reason or intimidate someone to get calm or to get present. So we have to start with the sound of our voice, our body language, and the pace even of our words. So slow, deep, these kinds of things are the ticket. Assist and affirm. So encouraging our children to name what they're feeling. And we're not taught this very often. We're not taught how to articulate our feeling states. This is something that I've done as a unit with every class I've had. And it actually, here you can do this with your youth. They love GIFs. We are in an age of GIFs and memes. And so we generate a whole bunch of words for feeling states, and then we create like PowerPoint presentations or very varying, articles with all these different GIFs, and it's really fun. Kids tend to really like it. Affirm that their feelings are okay. Feelings aren't rational, so we can't argue with them. We just need to accept them. They just need to be heard. But then the real magic starts to happen when we just get present. So I've experienced this myself when I've had an anxiety or panic attack. We get so out there. The antidote to that distress is to get right back here. And the way we do that is through the body, is through the senses. So we have the 5 senses: sight, smell, taste, hearing, touch. And so there's this game, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if that's too long, start at 3. So tell me 3 things you can see right now, right? Kids that are in distress too, I mean, young ones especially, they love to tell you how old they are, right? So how old are you? I'm this many, right? Then they're there with you. Oh, good. What can you see? Tell me 3 things you can see right now. I see my phone. I see my water glass. I see this screen. Tell me 3 things you can hear, right? So now we're in the body and we've got our attention away from the panic and distress and into the present moment. Another thing that can really work, and this is something as a first aid trainer and wilderness guide, this is a medical technique that I teach everyone, but it's also something I employ with students and youth. It's what I call birthday candle breathing, and you can try it with me. So it's like blowing out your birthday candles in slow motion. So take a nice deep breath in, and then blow out your birthday candles in slow motion. The longer the exhale, the more effective this tool is. And sometimes kids like to have a competition. How long can I make my exhale? But this is tricking the body into releasing neurochemicals that soothe and relax the body. But then the other thing that we forget sometimes is like there's this analogy in the wilds, like when a bunny is chased by a predator and it has to go into the fight, flight, or freeze, and it's got a bunch of adrenaline and it's taking off and it's running for its life. Let's say the bunny gets away. The bunny actually does physical movement, shuddering or shaking, to release the adrenaline that's been unleashed in their body. We forget to do this as human beings in this culture. So we have to let it out. For me, sometimes it's crying. That's a great release. But sometimes it's stomping our feet. Sometimes it's literally shaking. And sometimes it's various types of breath work. So some practical techniques for regulation. And it's not always we want to bring us down from dysregulation, but sometimes we need to motivate ourselves, or we need to create more focus as we transition from recess to a mental task, right? So I've talked about birthday candle breathing. That's for emotional and respiratory distress. It's actually a first aid technique for somebody having a heart attack or a panic attack. Really, really effective. Anyone of you with asthma or with kids with asthma, you know this technique already. It's pursed lips breathing. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is excellent for grounding our awareness in the senses in the present moment. Bunny breath is energizing, right? So I want you to try this with me. Think of a bunny breathing, right? It has this cute little nose and it twitches its whiskers. So it sips in little bits of breath with its little bunny nose, right? So let's try this. It's fun, trust me. And polar bear breath. This is something I tell students who are a little antsy in class and can't sit still. I talk about how polar bears are white. That's camouflage because they live in the Arctic and there's lots of snow there, except their nose is black, right? So when they're hunting, they actually put their head down on their desk and they cover up their nose with their paws to hide that black dot. And then they sit there and lay in wait and breathe quietly while they hunt. And just that kind of activity, you can try this with your kids at dinner or breakfast. It's calming. It's really soothing. Lion's breath is a really fun one. It's for releasing anger and frustration. It's a good one for the let it out phase of coming down from distress. And kids love it. And even teenagers I've worked with have really enjoyed getting their lion on, as we call it. You can get your claws out and you bring your head back, take a big lion's share of air, and then stick out your tongue and let it out. A few of those when we're feeling overwhelmed, man, it feels good. And then physical things, I find when kids come in from recess, when I've been a classroom teacher, they have all kinds of monkey beans still. And if I need them to focus, the best way to focus the kid is to ask them to do a fancy balancing pose. So whether that's tree pose, standing on one leg, or warrior 3, which is where your front body goes all the way forward and one leg goes all the way back. So you're like a T standing on one leg. We can't actually stick our balance. We can't balance our body unless our brain is calm and steady. And we can't do either of those things if our breath is not steady and calm. So balancing poses just go get us right into that calm place, ready to learn. So those are a few of the ways that I personally, for my own well-being and for the kids that I work with, am using the body and the breath as the bridge for readiness learning.
So we had a couple of questions that some families had, so I'm going to ask a couple of them on their behalf. I know we had one in particular with regards to hearing impairment, so I'm actually going to put a resource in the chat for that one that has a link there for that particular question. Just because it's a little bit easier and I know it's a little bit more in depth, and that way it meets hopefully the needs of that particular individual. If at any point in time that it does not, or you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. I will also add my email as well, just in case, to make sure that that information is shared. So a couple of questions that we had was, so we talked about how to keep kids motivated with regards to having those breaks, making sure that they're able to work through some stuff, but any other particular tips and tricks that you guys might have for, kids specifically in between grades, junior kindergarten to grade 6, so a little bit younger on that spectrum.
Yeah, so I can jump on here. What I suggest for family systems is to have them work in little batches. We want to cluster the work. So we're talking about, okay, 5 minutes, set a timer, because as soon as there's a timer, kids are like, I'm on the clock. And it kind of ties into that kind of need of competition that children have. So like, we're talking like 5 minutes, you do this, and then take a little break. And Aleyah, I just think is such a great, she's such a great example of how to be like fun and silly, shake it off, take some breath, and then, okay, set the timer, now do 10 minutes of this task. So I think what really helps is if we batch the work, actually use a timer, or even like an egg timer, or even just like, I was just going to say the Days of Our Lives wheel, but that's not what it's called. That like hourglass. Sorry, I just totally dated myself as somebody. I didn't watch Days of My Life. I think I might have, but temporarily. But the idea is like something to regulate time for the children, but little batches. And if you're working remotely, my suggestion would be like, okay, so I need to work for a batch of 30 minutes. You go do some of your tasks, and then we're going to meet up in the kitchen, or then we're going to meet here on the couch. So let them know that you're batching your work as well. That just helps to create a system, or as Aleyah likes to say, a rhythm, which sounds way better than my word of routine.
I use my iPhone timer
Yeah.
And it is absolutely so key for me and my work motivation to know, like, I just have to do this little window and then I get a joy break. Yeah.
I would add on to that too, just based on noticing what happened with our own kids is that, yeah, we had to work in small batches, and if we didn't remain consistent with that, it took a long time to be able to get them back into that. And I'm
Yes.
sure a lot of parents feel that same way. We would go a week without okay, we had to work, we're not doing anything. And then as soon as we sat down, our kids would break down after 5-10 minutes in tears, because as soon as they had that challenge, they shut down. But the next day it got better, and the next day it got better. And so it was remaining really consistent with that, because if you do lose it, then you're going to lose them as well.
Yeah, exactly. And a couple of tips too for those with some special needs, making sure that you're providing those transition times, that you're giving those preps in between those sessions, so that when you are batching your work, whatever that task is at that point in time, you're allowing them that remembering of, hey, only a couple more minutes, or one more question, or whatever it is that you're going to use as your staple, that then they know what's going to be expected. So using words like first and then, that type of thing. Another thing I wanted to mention too, that Rich mentioned, was about the sticker system. So being able to, earn stickers to be able to pick an event after, I think, is a great motivation for a lot of kids. And it definitely does motivate and bring that family element to it too. We're in this current situation. That's something that we're trying to impose, but let's be honest, a lot of us are also a little stressed with being all stuck in the same household. So it's nice to have something specific that we're all looking forward to. And I think parents, adults in the household, as well as the children, actually are looking forward to that by the end of it as well.
Orlana, you make a really good point about expectations and transitions. Something that is, and I'm sure Robyne and Rich, you've seen it too, like every classroom has a daily schedule, especially in the elementary. So it's a big visual calendar, and kids can sometimes, the leader of the day, make that schedule or put the right words and subject headings on the right periods and timelines. So having some kind of daily schedule, and then with that motivation and engagement, the gradual release of responsibility. So maybe the kids get to make that calendar, or get, maybe a reward is getting to update it with a different color, or whatever is working, but having that visual schedule is a really key piece.
For sure. Exactly. So another thing that I wanted to talk about was, which I guess, Aleyah, this is probably going to be more for you, my dear, is how to manage some of the moods and anxieties that kids are having, especially with having to sit for those periods of time and trying to work through that, of what those expectations are, and how to support their children through that.
I'll start, but I'll also throw it to, because I know everyone has a lot of experience with this. My first thing is a mantra. It's a question. How important is it? And something we're all, like, all of us, no matter how privileged and resilient and otherwise well suited to this home life thing, our focus has been splintered. Our productivity has been fractioned. Like, we just cannot do everything we used to be doing in the before times. So sometimes things seem pressing. And then if you just step back and take that body pause and take a breath and ask yourself, how important is this? It might not be that important. It might just not be that important. So that's important to remember. And like Rich said, and like Robyne said, it's about talking about it. It's about naming what we're going through and what our fears are. And then what I really love to do with kids is finding a creative outlet for articulating or processing. So that's why art therapy is, like, so great in so many areas, whether it's addiction, mental health, all these different things. So being able to journal, or, bang pots and pans, or make a collage or a vision board, or anything that gets some of these thoughts out of our bodies and into something physical.
Perfect. Last question that I have here is, what about for those, what can you tell for those parents that are worrying about whether their children are going to meet the academics requirements, and in particular, the concern about potentially having to redo any grades when school goes back to normal?
Yeah, I can jump on this one. So, Orlana, on that one for the parents, every child across the world has had a disruption in their learning. This is not something that is unique to Ontario or to Canada. This is global, and school has been interrupted. And one of the things that I think is so important right now, I think the most important curriculum we need to be thinking about is our children's wellness and our children's mental health and their emotional health. We're all going to figure it out. We're all going to have to play some form of catch up, or we're going to have to recalibrate our expectations of what this looks like. So I think what's really important is to trust that we're going to figure this out. We're going to get through it. No child is going to get left behind next year because they didn't do enough worksheets or they didn't do enough Zoom classes. From the equity perspective in the province, we have legislation that says we will not discriminate against a child. So we need to just trust the fact that no one is going to be kind of coming out ahead in this process. Everybody is in the same boat. Children's rights are protected within the collective agreements of what children experience. And I'm thinking really especially of the children that I support and families with children with special needs. Like, there is so much more than academics. There is the social, there's the emotional health. It's the fact that we just want children to experience moments of joy and play. We want to create some positive memories that are associated with this COVID season. And, I love how Aleyah even uses the words "in the before times," right? Because now we're in this kind of new season. And I can tell you right now, I navigated this on a different level. Our children are, as I said, are 16, 14, and 12. And I realized that my son, our oldest one, who's 16, I think he got about a week of grade 10 science before all of this went down because it was second semester. And the reality is maybe he hasn't learned all of the strands of the curriculum, because I think I mentioned this to you before, Orlana. Hunter wasn't doing day learning, like e-learning. He was doing night school because he would do his homework at 10 o'clock at night. So he was taking night school during the pandemic. And I don't know how much he actually retained, but I do know he's healthy. And I do know that he's okay with social things. And that's what we need to prioritize. The kids don't need to get every single curriculum strand. Just think about all the things we've already forgotten as grownups in the curriculum. I have forgotten more of the curriculum than I ever retained. So give ourselves a break. We can always look it up later.
And I'll just throw in my own thinking on this is that I don't, it's that whole idea of coming to terms again with, I don't think this is something, the situation that we're in here is ending at the end of the school year. I think the structure of how things are set up in education beyond this, online learning in some fashion is going to probably remain present for people who are uncomfortable with everything that's still going on in the world. And so with that, the whole system has to change and be able to modify its expectations for our learners going forward, and how we can move everyone together. But the biggest piece, and we say this to our teacher candidates who are missing out on some real hands-on learning in schools right now, is that when they actually go out into the classroom, and whatever that's going to look like next year or the year after, they are going to be so much stronger than previous years of teachers, because they've had to deal with this. They've had to navigate this new territory. And I think it's just going to be, when we finally get to step outside and go back to some of those things that we did in before time, that we're gonna rock it. It's gonna be that much easier for many kids. So.
Yeah, and just to echo that as well, sorry if I can take one more minute, it's the idea that we might not be learning all of the curriculum strands right now, but gosh, Orlana, we are learning a lot of life skills. We are learning collaboration and teamwork and resourcefulness and flexibility, nimble thinking. We are learning some really great skill sets that I think are going to be transferable into the future days. So this isn't just about curriculum and content. We're learning habits. We're learning practices. We're also fostering hopefully compassion and empathy. We're talking about racial reckonings that are happening at foot. We're trying to equalize and understanding equity issues. There's a lot of things that we're talking about and learning about. And my goodness, I bet those kids are going to know how to wash their hands by the end of this.
It's also too, like, those pieces, those transferable skills are part of the curriculum. They're
Yes.
part of that. Like, we call them learning skills and character. I forget what the buzzwords are, but there's places on report cards for these skills. So they are part of the curriculum. And if it's like an external motivator, like, these are what employers are looking for. And these are the skills that allow people to survive and thrive at post-secondary institutions. So these are hugely valuable skills. We just have to think outside that curriculum box. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing, like Robyne was just saying, keeping up with world events and like critical thinking about news outlets and like, these things are part of the curriculum. They're part of the geography and social sciences curriculums through K to 12. So there's ways to be checking boxes without focusing directly on those, assignments and grammar sheets, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Basically, in a nutshell, life skills are just as important as the academics that we're doing right now.
100%.
And in a nutshell, basically, everyone just give yourself a pat on the back and give yourself a break, yes. Right? We're all in the same thing together. And like we said, educators alike, teachers alike, parents alike, caregivers, we're all managing as best as we can. Kids are doing the same thing. So doing it in small bits, trying to find a rhythm or a routine as best as you can, thinking about those transition times and giving yourselves a break, figuring out a way to motivate your kids that's going to benefit them, whether it's a sticker chart, whether it's, those fun breaks activities outside, whatever that may be. The last plug I'm going to give is in the participant chat group. I also put in the Facebook group for the Provincial SNP because there is some resources there with regards to some visuals, which Aleyah talked about too, that all schools have in their classrooms as well, that kind of help with that transition piece for kids, so that way they know kind of what to expect moving forward. Other than that, do you guys have any other pieces of advice or things that you would like to share with our audience?
I have one quick thing.
Oh, come on.
Well, just I will send this when we package this video, but I was a part of the mental health assist team creating real tangible resources for classroom teachers. There's one for ETFO elementary and there's one for high school, and we can hook you up with those links because they're so ready to use. And Perfect. there's a whole booklet of them. Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
So my final quote, I literally saw this right before logging on, and I was just going through Twitter and I saw this quote and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is perfect. And the quote was, when the world is predictable, you need smart people. When it's unpredictable, you need adaptable, resilient people. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was very fitting for this talk.
Perfect.
That's awesome. And I just want to give a big thanks to you, Orlana, and to my colleagues here. We could talk about education all the time. So this has just been our wheelhouse and our jam. We're deeply honored to be invited into your community. And again, we encourage everyone in the network to please reach out. We are resources for you. We want to help these conversations to continue. And again, to echo what you said, we all are doing the best that we can with the tools that we have right now, and practicing body kindness and practicing managing our expectations. Like, we all can do hard things, and it's okay to get tired and feel wobbly. But what's really at the heart of resiliency is being in tune with yourself to know what you need in that moment. So do whatever you need to do to make sure you're okay, because once you're regulated as a parent, then you can help regulate your child. A dysregulated parent can't help a dysregulated child. So we have to be okay so our children and our young ones can be okay. So thank you, merci, and miigwech to everyone. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. Appreciate it.
Thank you.